pregnant wife was kicked out of her own baby's nursery. Mistress moved in instead. Life's most shocking betrayals don't always come from strangers. Sometimes they're orchestrated by the people you trust, most people you've built your whole world around. Picture a young wife, swollen with pregnancy, filled with hope for the baby she's about to bring into the world. Now imagine that same mother to be suddenly shut out of her own home, replaced inside the very nursery she decorated with love. The intruder? A woman who barged in, claimed the father, and seized the wife's dreams, leaving heartbreak in her wake. This is a story of betrayal, secrets, and unexpected vengeance that rocked a family to its core. Clarissa wasn't always this exhausted, clutching her growing belly in confusion and despair. There was a time when her soul brimmed with optimism, envisioning a life filled with blissful mornings and cozy nights. As a high-spirited young woman in her late 20s, she had always harbored big dreams, owning a small candle shop, traveling the globe, and starting a family with someone who cherished her. That dream seemed to crystallize the day she met Timothy Drake at a fundraiser in downtown Seattle. Timothy was handsome in a boyish way, with a warm smile that charmed people instantly. Despite the hustle of the event, an auction for Seattle's Children's Hospital, he noticed Clarissa struggling to balance a tray of donuts for donors. He hurried over to help, turning what could have been an embarrassing mishap into a flirty joke that made her laugh for the first time that evening. They had instant chemistry. She admired his gentle, helpful nature. He was drawn to her passion for volunteer work and her sweet sincerity. Their courtship was the stuff of whimsical romance. They strolled through Pike Place Market, sipping hot cocoa while watching street performers. They spent rainy afternoons in coffee shops, sampling pastries and dreaming about a future that sparkled with possibilities. Clarissa loved how Timothy spoke about responsibility and building a comfortable life. He'd mentioned wanting to secure a stable job so his future wife would never feel alone or unsafe. Eventually, he landed a decent position at a tech company. Clarissa began working part-time at her friend Sandra's boutique, hoping to invest her earnings into starting her candle business. They shared an apartment on the outskirts of Seattle, a charming little place with a view of the skyline if you squinted through the living room window. It was small, but cozy. Late nights found them dancing to slow music in their living room, the city lights shimmering in the distance. Mornings brought laughter and pancakes in bed. Less than 2 years after meeting, Timothy proposed. It was simple and sweet, just as Clarissa preferred. He took her to their favorite coffee shop near Pioneer Square. Huddled by the window on a rainy afternoon, he slid a ring box across the table, his eyes brimming with nervous excitement. Clarissa burst into tears of joy. It all felt perfect, like a fairy tale come to life. She said yes, and they married in a modest ceremony a few months later, with immediate family and close friends gathered at a small chapel in Green Lake. They promised each other forever. Clarissa's mother gave her a locket, once belonging to Clarissa's late grandmother, a family heirloom said to bring good luck. Timothy's father offered a proud toast, praising his son's loyalty and integrity. Their first year of marriage was joyous. They both worked hard, saving money for a down payment on a suburban house near Bellevue. They entertained the idea of kids, but decided to wait until they had a stable foundation. Timothy's career advanced, though it demanded more of his time and energy. Clarissa sometimes felt lonely at home, but she reminded herself that building a life often required sacrifices. One day, after an important tech conference, Timothy came home beaming. He'd made strong connections, aced a major presentation, and was offered a significant promotion. The raise would let them finally make a move from their small apartment to a bigger home. Clarissa was thrilled. She prayed this change would lighten his stress and deepen their bond, and for a time it did. They found a charming 2-story house in a quiet cul-de-sac close to a reputable school district. It wasn't far from a well-known store, Ashley Furniture, where they spent weekends picking out the perfect couch and dining set. Setting up a new place was exciting, like painting their future on a blank canvas. Before long, Clarissa discovered she was pregnant. It happened sooner than they had planned, but that positive test result lit a radiant spark in her. She had always dreamed of holding a child in her arms, singing lullabies, and teaching them all the virtues she believed in. Timothy's initial shock gave way to cautious enthusiasm. While a part of him worried about finances, he assured Clarissa that he'd make it work. He extended his hours at the office, promising her, "I'll take care of us, I promise." For a while, it seemed like a true partnership. After the morning sickness subsided, Clarissa glowed with maternal pride. She spent hours researching baby products, reading about infant care, and imagining color schemes for the nursery. She picked out adorable decorations, plush clouds, smiling stars, and tiny stuffed animals that would soon greet their bundle of joy. Timothy attended a few doctor's appointments, especially the big ultrasound that confirmed it was a baby girl. Tears of joy streamed down Clarissa's cheeks. The sight of that little heartbeat on the screen felt like the world's greatest miracle. But change, especially the subtle kind, is a tricky thing. Around Clarissa's 4th month of pregnancy, she noticed small shifts in Timothy's behavior. He became more distant, always glued to his phone or making excuses to stay late at the office. She tried to rationalize it. Work was piling up. He was new in his role, anxious to impress the senior management. And yet, there was something else, a certain coldness in his tone, a reluctance to engage in meaningful conversation. Sometimes he'd come home drenched in expensive cologne that wasn't his usual brand, claiming a coworker had sprayed some cologne sample near him. She tried to believe him. She tried to ignore her growing suspicions. After all, trust was crucial in any marriage, right? The first major alarm sounded when Timothy forgot about their scheduled appointment to look at cribs at Ashley Furniture a day. Clarissa had been raving about for weeks. He didn't just forget. He turned his phone off, disappearing for hours. No explanations, no apologies. He brushed it off with vague excuses. Clarissa felt a pang of hurt, but she tried to put on a brave face. She told herself not to nag, to be supportive, to show him she believed in him. That night, as she lay awake in bed with Timothy asleep beside her, she felt her heart pounding with worry. Their relationship was changing. She had no idea why or how deeply the fault lines ran, but she felt them. In the darkness, she clutched her locket for comfort, wondering if her grandmother's watchful spirit might guide her through these uncertain times. As weeks passed, Timothy's behavior worsened. Clarissa overheard him on hushed phone calls, his voice full of a nervous excitement. She hadn't heard directed toward her in a while. She spotted text messages that he quickly swiped away, and there were random lunches he claimed to have with clients. But Clarissa, wanting desperately to keep her marriage afloat, brushed off her concerns. She told herself, "Maybe I'm just hormonal. Maybe I'm reading too much into this." Little did she know that the life she'd so meticulously built was about to shatter. That bright nursery she'd decorated with so much hope was destined to host a cruel betrayal she never saw coming. In the deepest chambers of her heart, Clarissa believed love could conquer all. She had no idea that one day soon she would be forced to pack her things, eyes brimming with tears, leaving behind the very crib and rocking chair she'd lovingly selected. And a stranger, someone uninvited and heartless, would settle into that sacred space, taking up residence in her place. Clarissa's excitement for her growing baby fueled her every decision during her 6th month of pregnancy. She pored over color swatches, imagining a nursery filled with soft yellows, whimsical stars, and cuddly animals. Yet while she busied herself with paint samples and baby blankets, Timothy grew increasingly withdrawn. Late nights at work, hushed phone calls, and his constant checking of texts hinted that something was amiss. One afternoon, Clarissa noticed a new name flashing on Timothy's phone screen, Alicia. Initially, she brushed it off, maybe a colleague, but unease settled in her stomach when Timothy dismissed her questions, insisting it was just a work thing. Red flags multiplied. He skipped their appointment to select a crib, leaving Clarissa alone at Ashley Furniture, browsing styles meant for both parents to decide. When Timothy finally showed up hours later, he reeked of unfamiliar cologne. Her apprehension grew with each vague excuse. Despite her misgivings, Clarissa tried to stay optimistic. She believed Timothy was merely overworked and hoped the tension would ease as the pregnancy progressed. Desperate for normalcy, she cooked elaborate meals, coaxed him to feel their baby's kicks, and invited him to the doctor's appointments he usually missed. Still, his aloofness lingered an icy gap between them. Late one night, Clarissa caught sight of his phone, unattended. Shame pricked her conscience, but desperation won out. She unlocked it, using their wedding anniversary, heart thudding as she scrolled. Confirming her worst fears, she read flirtatious messages between Timothy and Alicia, affectionate emojis, secret lunch dates, and promises to meet again. Clarissa stared at the screen, tears burning her eyes. Everything she feared was true. Her husband was having an affair. She replaced the phone, chest tight with sorrow. Exhausted from heartbreak, she confronted him the next day, voice trembling as she asked about Alicia. He denied it all, calling her paranoid. Too drained to fight, Clarissa let the topic drop, though her suspicions were now undeniable. The pregnancy felt heavier than ever, a stark reminder that she carried a child whose father was drifting away. Still, Clarissa pressed forward, determined to keep the nursery a refuge of love. She draped fairy lights across the windows and hung a mobile above the crib. In quiet moments, she gently rested a hand on her belly, whispering lullabies to her baby girl, praying Timothy would return to the man she thought she knew. But the secrets he harbored loomed larger each day. Unbeknownst to Clarissa, Alicia was already angling to push her aside. The nursery, once a symbol of togetherness, was on the cusp of becoming the battleground for a betrayal. Clarissa could never have imagined. As Clarissa's due date approached, each day felt like walking on eggshells. Timothy oscillated between guilt-ridden compassion and brazen defiance. Meanwhile, Alicia's presence loomed like a sinister cloud overshadowing their home. Clarissa thought she'd seen the worst of Timothy's betrayals until one afternoon, when she waddled into the nursery to discover an atrocity she could hardly believe. Alicia had moved her belongings, suitcases, clothing, even a makeup case right into the baby's nursery. She was in the middle of rearranging furniture, pushing aside the rocking chair Clarissa had purchased months ago. Alicia's eyes flicked over Clarissa with a dismissive glare. The stench of her strong perfume smothered the sweet scent of baby powder that had once filled the room. Clarissa stood paralyzed. "What are you doing here? Why do you have suitcases?" Her voice trembled with confusion and anger. With a casual shrug, Alicia answered, "Didn't Timothy tell you? He said he's letting me stay here for a while." She gazed at Clarissa's protruding belly, her lips curving into a condescending sneer. "I'll just be in this room. Apparently, there's nowhere else in the house for me." Clarissa felt her world tilt. She stared at the woman who had invaded her sanctuary. This was the room she'd painstakingly decorated, dreaming of lullabies and bedtime stories. Alicia threw a bright pink suitcase on the floor near the crib, as if preparing to settle in permanently. Timothy entered behind Clarissa, looking far too casual for the gravity of the situation. He brushed by her to stand next to Alicia. "Clarissa," he started, his tone exasperated. "Alicia's going through a tough time right now. She lost her apartment, long story. She needs a place to crash. Just temporarily. Temporarily." Clarissa's voice cracked. Her eyes darted between Timothy and Alicia. You've got to be kidding me. We're weeks away from having a baby. And you're letting the word mistress caught in her throat. You're letting her move into our home. Timothy sighed, as though Clarissa was the one being unreasonable. We have a spare room, he countered, gesturing vaguely down the hall, but it's not furnished. This nursery is basically empty. Empty. Clarissa nearly lost her composure. She glared at him. It's our baby's room. It's not some guest suite. Without missing a beat, Alicia chimed in, relax, honey. I'll be out of here in no time. I just need a temporary roof. Timothy's being a friend. Clarissa's stomach churned. A friend? She turned to Timothy, searching his eyes for any sign of compassion or logic. How could you do this? He avoided her gaze. I had no choice. She needs help, and I can't exactly turn her away. It's only for a few days, but a few days stretched into a week, then two. Alicia made herself at home, lounging around in the nursery, adjusting the baby's decorations to suit her taste. At night, she slept on a makeshift air mattress placed beside the crib. The humiliation stacked up. She demanded Timothy help her with errands, asked him to pick up groceries, and even borrowed Clarissa's towels without asking. Clarissa's stress levels skyrocketed. She felt the baby squirm uneasily within her belly, as though the unborn child sensed the chaos. She tried to talk sense into Timothy, to remind him that they were about to become parents, that Alicia's presence was toxic. He brushed her off, insisting he was just trying to help a friend in need. Don't make this into a big drama, he spat one night. It's not like I'm pushing you out of anything. But that was precisely how it felt. Clarissa found herself avoiding the nursery altogether because Alicia was always inside, treating it like her personal domain. Twice, Clarissa caught Alicia rummaging through baby clothes in the dresser drawers, making critical remarks about Clarissa's style. She'd hold up a tiny onesie and sneer, "You actually think this looks cute?" Clarissa's cheeks flushed with anger and heartbreak. She wanted to yell, to fight, to throw Alicia out by the hair, but she was terrified of risking her high blood pressure as the due date loomed. Her doctor had stressed the importance of reducing stress, yet here she was, living in a war zone. Things took an even darker turn when Clarissa's mother, Margaret, decided to visit. Concerned by her daughter's increasing distress, Margaret drove an hour to check on Clarissa. Upon stepping into the house, she immediately sensed tension so thick it was suffocating. She asked, "Where's Tim?" Clarissa's face fell. She motioned toward the nursery. Without hesitation, Margaret marched down the hallway. There, she found Alicia casually flipping through a glossy magazine in the rocking chair. Timothy sat by the window, half-heartedly typing on his laptop. Margaret froze, her eyes darting around the pink suitcases and random clothes scattered about, overshadowing the once pristine baby decor. "And who," Margaret demanded, "is this?" Alicia raised an eyebrow, sizing up the older woman. Timothy stood abruptly, muttering something about Alicia being a friend in need. Margaret squared her shoulders. "Clarissa," she called out, "come here this instant. Explain to me what is happening." Clarissa approached, her eyes rimmed red from sleepless nights and tears. Before she could speak, Alicia let out a dismissive laugh. Margaret's voice trembled with anger. "Get out," she said, pointing at Alicia. "Get your things and go, now." Timothy intervened. "Mom, calm down. You have no right to," Margaret whirled on him, eyes blazing. "Don't you dare tell me to calm down. This is my daughter's home, my grandchild's nursery. And who is this woman to set up shop here?" Clarissa thought she'd found an ally, but Timothy's reaction stunned her. He snapped at Margaret, "You're overstepping. I pay the mortgage. This is my house. Don't come in here and start ordering people around." Margaret's voice shook with rage, but she stifled it for Clarissa's sake. She turned to her daughter and whispered, "Pack your things. You're coming with me." At those words, Alicia smirked, crossing her arms. Timothy looked ready to argue further, but Clarissa felt torn. She was weeks away from giving birth. Leaving would mean uprooting everything she'd prepared for the baby. It felt profoundly unfair that she'd be the one to abandon the home she'd decorated so lovingly, her safe space, while Alicia got to stay behind. Yet looking at Margaret's anguished expression, Clarissa knew she couldn't endure this torment any longer. Despite Margaret's pleas, Clarissa hesitated. "Mom, the baby's almost here. I can't just. I need the nursery. I need my doctor's office nearby." Her voice wavered. Part of her couldn't bear giving up the dream she'd built in that house. Another part dreaded bringing a newborn into such a hostile environment. Timothy, sensing her conflict, put an arm around Clarissa. "You don't have to leave," he said quietly. "No one's kicking you out. Alicia will only stay for a short period." But Alicia, reading the moment, decided to twist the knife. With an air of entitlement, she walked over to Clarissa, glancing at her baby bump. "Actually," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "I'm allergic to dog hair, and I noticed you have that fluffy rug in here. I think it'd be easier for me if we moved it out of the nursery. I need to breathe freely, you know." Clarissa gawked in disbelief. That fluffy rug, grey and white with star patterns, had been a gift from Sandra, Clarissa's closest friend. It matched the entire celestial theme of the room. Alicia was basically insisting on redecorating the nursery around her own comfort. Before Clarissa could respond, Alicia turned to Timothy, making an exaggerated show of coughing. "Can we do that tomorrow, Tim? Move out the rug. I might need some new sheets too. These baby ones are so childish." Timothy's face flickered with discomfort, but he remained silent, unwilling to confront Alicia. Clarissa looked at him, tears welling up as she realized how little he cared about her emotional turmoil. Margaret's hands clenched into fists. In a trembling voice, she said, "I have never been more ashamed of you, Tim." He swallowed hard but didn't retort. Alicia, looking triumphant, sauntered out of the room, leaving a trail of her overpowering perfume. Margaret looked at Clarissa with heartbreak etched on her face. "You cannot stay here like this," she whispered. "This is cruel." Clarissa broke down, sobbing into her mother's shoulder. Rage and desperation collided within her. She wanted to scream, to smash Alicia's suitcases, to forcibly drag her out of the house. But with her belly so large, with her emotional state so fragile, Clarissa felt powerless. She thought of her baby, of how stress could trigger complications. She looked at Timothy one last time, silently pleading for him to step up as a husband and father. He lowered his gaze to the floor, offering no defense. That was the moment Clarissa realized he'd chosen. Alicia's comfort over hers, over the babies, and over their marriage. She pressed a trembling hand against her stomach, feeling a faint kick life, reminding her to keep fighting, to survive this. Yet in that moment, all she could do was shuffle to her bedroom, pack a bag of essentials, and follow her mother out of the house. She left behind the crib, the changing table, the star-studded lights, and every hope she'd nestled into that nursery. Stepping onto the front porch, Clarissa gazed at the sky. It was dusk, with streaks of orange and pink fading fast, as if symbolizing the last embers of her once happy life. She felt dizzy, tears drying on her cheeks. Her mother guided her down to the car. As they drove away, Clarissa couldn't help but look back at the house, her dream home, overshadowed by the presence of a woman who had no right to be there. But if Alicia thought this was the end of Clarissa's fight, she was in for a rude awakening. Sometimes the strongest forms of determination are born out of despair. And Clarissa, battered and bruised, was about to discover a well of resilience she didn't know she possessed. Clarissa spent her first days away from the house at her mother's place in Everett. Though the cozy living room and childhood memories offered a degree of comfort, the betrayal weighed heavily on her. 8 months pregnant, she worried about her baby's well-being, terrified stress could trigger complications. While Margaret tended to her, Clarissa often lay awake in bed, replaying images of Alicia dragging suitcases into the nursery. Despite feeling drained, Clarissa sought legal counsel. Her new attorney, Barbara Callahan, listened intently to everything: Timothy's affair, the humiliating eviction, Alicia's brazen behavior. Barbara urged Clarissa to file for spousal and child support, reminding her that she had every right to protect her interests and her unborn child. Gathering evidence, including Alicia's mocking text messages, became Clarissa's lifeline. She saved screenshots of Alicia's taunts, each one fueling her resolve to fight back. Beyond the legal matters, emotional tolls loomed. Alicia's presence in the nursery haunted Clarissa's dreams, a twisted reminder of how easily Timothy had betrayed her. Still, Clarissa's maternal instincts refused to let her crumble. She focused on prenatal yoga, daily walks, and soft lullabies, determined to bring her daughter into the world with as much peace as possible. Meanwhile, Alicia reveled in her supposed victory. She texted Clarissa once more, "Your nursery looks so good on me," sparking fresh heartbreak. Instead of lashing out, Clarissa collected every message. Barbara insisted such evidence would prove Alicia's cruelty. Slowly, Clarissa realized she had to survive for her baby's sake. Alicia's cruelty might wound her pride, but it wouldn't destroy her spirit. Late one night, a storm of shouting erupted in the very home Clarissa had left. Neighbors later reported seeing Alicia's car pull up, Timothy rushing outside, and both engaged in a furious argument on the front lawn. Alicia's voice rang out in shrill accusations. Timothy shouted back, fear and anger rippling through his words. After nearly half an hour of chaos, Alicia sped off into the night, leaving behind a shaken Timothy. The next morning, Timothy called Clarissa, his voice full of regret and exhaustion. "Alicia's gone," he said, as though disclosing a terrible secret. He admitted she had packed her belongings and left. With Alicia no longer in the house, Timothy tried inviting Clarissa to return. Yet even in his desperation, Clarissa sensed he was still floundering, caught between shame and confusion. She refused to go back on impulse. Her baby came first. Though Alicia's physical presence vanished, the damage remained. The nursery she'd commandeered still bore her toxic imprint, and Clarissa's hope for a harmonious home life lay in tatters. But as she gathered strength at her mother's house, Clarissa realized she was no longer a frightened wife. She was a mother-to-be, equipped with a firm belief that no mistress, no betrayal, could rob her of the fierce love she held for her child and the resolve to protect them both. On a cloudy Tuesday morning, Clarissa woke up with sharp pains shooting across her abdomen. She realized her contractions had begun. Her mother rushed her to the hospital, where Clarissa found herself gripping the bed rails, sweat and tears mingling on her face. The emotional turmoil she'd endured now converged with the raw physical agony of childbirth. Despite it all, she felt a surge of determination. She had a mission: bring her daughter safely into the world. Nurses reassured her that everything was progressing normally. Her friend Sandra arrived, offering to help in the delivery room. Clarissa felt pangs of sadness at Timothy's absence, but she didn't call him. She wasn't sure she wanted him there, overshadowing this sacred moment. Her mind whirled. Did he even deserve to witness his child's first breath? Hours of labor later, at precisely 3:14 p.m., a piercing cry echoed in the birthing suite. Clarissa let out an exhausted sob of relief. Her daughter had arrived. Wrinkly, pink, and precious, she was placed on Clarissa's chest. Overwhelmed by emotion, Clarissa whispered, "Welcome to the world," tears of joy slipping from her eyes. She felt a wave of fierce love, unlike anything she'd known. News traveled quickly. Margaret called Timothy to inform him he had a daughter. Clarissa could hear his voice shouting on the phone from across the room, demanding to speak to her. She refused. Still shaking and exhilarated from giving birth, she needed peace. The baby, whom Clarissa named Lucy after her grandmother, deserved a calm entrance into life. Timothy arrived at the hospital that evening, frantic and disheveled. He tried to barge into Clarissa's room, only for Sandra to block him at the door. "She's resting," Sandra said firmly, eyes narrowing. "You can wait in the hall until she's ready." He slumped against a wall, guilt gnawing at him. Over the next hour, Margaret and Sandra debated letting him see Lucy. Finally, Clarissa agreed to a brief visit. Timothy tiptoed into the room, eyeing Lucy swaddled in a pink blanket. He stared, mouth agape, at the tiny life they'd created. Clarissa sensed raw emotion flicker across his features. For a moment, he appeared to regret every misstep he'd taken. "Can I hold her?" he asked, voice trembling. Clarissa hesitated, but nodded. The nurse gently placed Lucy into his arms. Timothy's gaze softened. He gently rocked the baby, tears brimming in his eyes. For a fleeting second, Clarissa felt pity for him, the father who had missed this monumental moment. But she steeled herself, reminding her heart of the betrayal still simmering beneath their fragile truce. After a minute, Lucy began to fuss, searching for her mother's warmth. Clarissa took her back, cooing soothing words until Lucy quieted. Awkward silence filled the air. Then Timothy blurted, "I'm so sorry. I messed up. I want to fix this." Clarissa studied him. His eyes held sorrow, but she also recalled the countless times he'd dismissed her, the nights he spent with Alicia. She thought of the text messages, the phone calls, the sight of Alicia's pink suitcase in the nursery. Clarissa bit her lip, anger flaring. "You'll have responsibilities, Timothy. Child support, medical bills. Whether or not you want to be in Lucy's life, that's up to you. But don't expect me to just forgive and forget." He hung his head. "I know," he mumbled. "I'll do whatever it takes. Just please, give me a chance." Clarissa, exhausted, shook her head. "We can talk about it later. I need to rest." Timothy opened his mouth as if to say more, but Margaret gently guided him out of the room. Once the door closed, Clarissa let out a shaky breath. She stared at Lucy's tiny hand curled around her finger, feeling the purest form of love. No matter what storms raged outside, she vowed to protect her daughter with every ounce of her being. In the following days, Clarissa focused on recovering. She stayed at her mother's home with baby Lucy, adjusting to sleepless nights and frequent feedings. Timothy sent texts daily, asking for updates, photos, permission to visit. Clarissa allowed short visits at her mother's house under her watchful eye. Lucy needed to know her father, even if Clarissa's trust in him had crumbled. Timothy brought gifts, diapers, plush toys, blankets embroidered with Lucy's name. Clarissa accepted them politely, but her heart remained guarded. Meanwhile, Alicia's final act of vengeance took shape. Timothy's boss received an anonymous email containing scandalous details of Timothy's affair with Alicia, screenshots of them exchanging intimate messages during work hours, and accusations that he had falsified reports to spend personal time with her. The HR department launched an investigation. Timothy was suspended pending a formal review, his career on the verge of collapse. Panicked, he tried to spin the story, blaming Alicia's manipulative ways. But the evidence was overwhelming. The company had a strict policy against workplace misconduct, and Timothy's involvement with Alicia, especially the part about using company time for personal rendezvous, violated multiple rules. Within a week, Timothy's termination was official. The news struck him like a thunderbolt. He had a mortgage to pay, a newborn to support, and legal fees if Clarissa proceeded with a custody battle or divorce. Desperate, he reached out to Clarissa again, this time with a humiliating confession. "I lost my job," he admitted, voice cracking. "Alicia leaked everything. I'm done. I'm so sorry." Clarissa felt torn. She had once hoped for karmic justice, but she never imagined it hitting so brutally and so soon. "So," she replied quietly, "Alicia has finally shown her true colors. Was it worth it?" He broke down sobbing on her mother's front porch. "I've ruined everything," he said. "I have no one now. Please, Clarissa, please, help me. I want to be here for Lucy." Clarissa stood behind the screen door, Lucy sleeping in her arms. Margaret peered from the living room, frowning. Clarissa's heart twisted as she watched Timothy crumble. Once upon a time, she'd loved him with all her heart. They had shared a dream, raising a family, growing old together. But that dream had shattered the day he let Alicia take her place. Now, karma had come swinging like a wrecking ball. Quietly, Clarissa motioned for him to enter. He sank onto the living room couch, burying his face in his hands. She stood at a distance, bouncing Lucy gently. "What exactly are you asking for?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He looked up, tears streaming. "I want to be part of Lucy's life. I want a chance to earn your forgiveness." Clarissa studied him. His eyes were puffy, his hair disheveled, the weight of regret visibly etched across his face. She thought of Lucy's future, growing up with a father who had hurt them both, but still her father nonetheless. "I won't stop you from seeing your child," Clarissa said, swallowing hard. "But forgiveness? That might never come." He nodded miserably. "I understand." Margaret lingered by the kitchen doorway, arms folded. After a tense silence, she softened slightly. "I won't speak for Clarissa, but if you truly regret what you've done, it's going to take more than tears. You need to rebuild from scratch. And you need to respect boundaries." Timothy nodded vigorously, desperation in every motion. "I will, I promise." Over the next few weeks, Timothy tried to show sincerity. He pawned some personal items to afford child support, applied for new jobs, and even began therapy sessions for what he described as impulsive behavior and self-sabotage. He quietly moved back into the house alone. Alicia had vanished, leaving behind a few worthless trinkets that he promptly discarded. He reached out to Clarissa for baby updates, often asking if she needed help. At first, she refused, proud and hurt. But eventually, she allowed him to drop off groceries and spend supervised time with Lucy in the afternoons. A shift started to take place in Clarissa's heart. While she couldn't forget the betrayal, she recognized that punishing Timothy forever wouldn't necessarily heal her wounds or benefit Lucy. Watching him hold Lucy gently, singing lullabies off-key, she saw glimpses of the man she once loved, an image overshadowed by his grave mistakes. Still, Clarissa's priority remained her daughter's well-being. She worked closely with her attorney, finalizing arrangements for custody, child support, and visitation. Timothy, humbled by unemployment and haunted by guilt, complied with everything. He faced a barrage of rejections in the job market, overshadowed by the scandal. A few smaller companies gave him interviews, but once they uncovered the reasons for his termination, they backed away. It seemed Alicia's vengeance had stained his career prospect. Ironically, Clarissa's candle-making passion re-emerged as a coping mechanism. Late at night, when Lucy finally slept, Clarissa would experiment with new fragrances in Margaret's garage. The rhythmic stirring of melted wax soothed her. She found comfort in creation, in building something beautiful, despite her battered emotions. Her friend Sandra suggested they launch a small online store. "You need something for yourself," Sandra insisted. "And you're so talented." Buoyed by her friend's enthusiasm, Clarissa agreed. They named the shop Everlasting Glow, referencing both the light of candles and Clarissa's unwavering hope for a better future. Orders trickled in, then slowly increased as word spread about the shop's unique, handcrafted products. For the first time in months, Clarissa felt a spark of excitement and identity beyond the heartbreak and beyond motherhood. She was forging her own path. As time went on, Timothy continued to show up, day after day, offering to help with Lucy's feedings, changing diapers, and reading bedtime stories. He'd bring small gifts, like a music box or a lullaby CD, purchased from discount stores, given his financial constraints. He sought therapy, persevered in job hunting, and frequently apologized, though Clarissa never demanded his contrition. She was learning that real change would only be evident in consistent actions, not empty words. Slowly, Clarissa noticed subtle changes. He no longer wore that air of self-centered entitlement. His phone rarely made a peep. Gone were the days of secret texts and suspicious phone calls. He listened more, took responsibility when Lucy fussed or needed soothing. Clarissa remained cautious, unsure if she could ever open her heart to him again. But for Lucy's sake, she allowed him the chance to show genuine growth. And as the weeks stretched into months, Alicia's name became a distant echo, a bad memory overshadowed by new routines, doctor visits for Lucy, candle-making sessions, Timothy's job applications. Alicia, rumored to have moved out of state, tried once or twice to call Timothy, but he blocked her. She posted cryptic social media rants, but nobody took the bait. The neighborhood gossip died down, replaced by mild pity for Timothy's fall from grace. In the end, Alicia had inflicted maximum damage. She'd stolen Clarissa's sense of security, tried to claim the nursery, wreaked havoc on Timothy's career, and nearly destroyed their family. But she also left behind a chance for Clarissa and Timothy to rebuild something new, albeit cracked and forever changed. The question remained, would Clarissa ever fully forgive him? Or would they remain partners in parenthood only, with no hope of romantic reconciliation? Only time would tell, but in the quiet moments of each new day, Clarissa felt a sense of relief. She had survived the storm. She had brought Lucy into the world. And the woman who had once taunted her from the rocking chair was no longer a threat, reduced to a memory of betrayal that served as a cautionary tale. Through it all, Clarissa discovered something priceless, her own resilience. Kicked out of the nursery that she poured her love into, she still thrived, and no one could rob her of that victory. Alicia might have tried to claim that sacred space, but Lucy's true sanctuary was always her mother's arms. Months passed, each day a small step away from the wreckage Alicia had left behind. Lucy, now babbling and grasping at anything within reach, became the center of Clarissa's universe. Margaret's home remained their safe haven, where the aroma of homemade soup and the gentle hush of pine trees comforted Clarissa in ways she desperately needed. Surprisingly, Timothy found steady freelance work doing software consulting. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid bills. He often came by to see Lucy, meticulously following the visitation schedule Clarissa and the attorney had drafted. Over time, Clarissa allowed him to join Lucy's pediatric appointments. Watching him handle Lucy's immunization visits, singing lullabies in the waiting room, Clarissa felt cracks in her wall of anger. Maybe he was truly remorseful. Her mother and Sandra kept a watchful eye, urging her to proceed cautiously. Clarissa agreed. One betrayal was enough to scar her for life. Even so, she could see the toll guilt had taken on Timothy. He looked thinner, his eyes haunted. Sometimes Lucy would stare at him with wide, curious eyes, as if sensing he was her father, yet unsure why he didn't live with them. Clarissa's heartstrings tugged at those moments. One crisp winter day, Timothy asked Clarissa if she'd consider returning to the house with Lucy strictly for co-parenting convenience, he claimed. "You can have the master bedroom and I'll stay in the guest room," he offered. "I just want to help with Lucy more directly. I want to provide for you both again." Clarissa's chest tightened at the invitation. Memories of Alicia's suitcases, the humiliations, the heartbreak, all flooded back. Even though Alicia was gone, Clarissa hesitated. That house was tainted with betrayal. Yet, she also thought about Lucy's future. Would living under one roof, strictly platonic, benefit their daughter? Could Clarissa ever feel truly safe in that place again? She sought guidance from her therapist, a gentle woman named Dr. Nguyen, who reminded her that trust rebuilds slowly. "You don't have to force yourself to move back," Dr. Nguyen said softly. "You can try baby steps. Maybe spend afternoons there. Gauge your emotional comfort. If it becomes too painful, you have every right to step back." So Clarissa decided on a compromise. She'd visit with Lucy during the day, observe whether Timothy's behavior remained consistent, and return to Margaret's place at night. Timothy agreed, hoping it might be a stepping stone toward a more permanent arrangement. The first time Clarissa re-entered the house, she trembled with anxiety. The nursery door was open, revealing the carefully arranged furniture and the star-shaped fairy lights. Alicia's presence had been thoroughly scrubbed away. No perfume residue, no suitcases, no sign of her infiltration, but the memory still lingered. Clarissa set Lucy on the soft rug Alicia had once deemed allergic, letting Lucy explore. Timothy crouched beside them, holding out a rattle. Lucy giggled, and for a moment, Clarissa glimpsed what might have been if Alicia had never barged in. They spent several afternoons this way, taking Lucy for strolls around the cul-de-sac, introducing her to curious neighbors. Some recognized Clarissa, offering sheepish smiles as if unsure how to address the scandal. Clarissa held her head high. She owed them no explanation. Despite the relative peace, Clarissa's scars remained. She would watch Timothy warily whenever his phone rang, though it was usually a recruiter or a client. He had changed his number after Alicia's final meltdown, hoping to avoid any further harassment. Clarissa would occasionally check the corners of the nursery, half expecting some sign of Alicia's existence. Nothing. It was as though Alicia had never been there. One day, as Lucy napped in the crib, Timothy approached Clarissa in the hallway. "I wanted to show you something," he said quietly, leading her into the bedroom. There, he opened the closet and revealed a small box tucked behind his shirts. Inside it, Clarissa found pages of a handwritten letter. Timothy had scribbled apology after apology, describing how he succumbed to Alicia's flattery and the excitement of something new. He wrote about how he regretted it every single day, especially after seeing Clarissa's tears. He wrote about losing his job, how that hammered the final nail in his coffin of regret. And, most heartbreakingly, he wrote about how he'd replay the memory of Clarissa decorating the nursery, wishing he could go back in time. Clarissa's eyes clouded with tears as she skimmed the pages. He'd never intended to show her, but he wanted her to know that he wasn't taking lightly the depth of his mistakes. She felt a surge of complicated emotion, anger, sadness, pity, and a glimmer of compassion. Maybe he truly had changed. She closed the box, exhaling slowly. "Thank you for showing me this," she murmured. Timothy shrugged, tears in his eyes. "I just want you to know that I'm not lying about my remorse." She nodded, heart torn. "One need time," she whispered. Slowly, her daytime visits lengthened. She found comfort in letting Lucy nap in the nursery, so she could sort through old baby clothes, rearrange shelves, and, in a way, reclaim the space Alicia had stolen. In a symbolic gesture, Clarissa replaced the star-shaped lights, once a highlight of her decor, but tainted by painful memories, with new ones shaped like tiny moons. She felt a sense of triumph discarding the old set, as if casting out Alicia's shadow for good. One afternoon, Clarissa was in the nursery, humming a lullaby to Lucy, when a knock on the front door made her stiffen. Timothy answered it, and she heard a female voice. Fear clenched her stomach. Images of Alicia bursting in, heart pounding. Clarissa scooped up Lucy and tiptoed to the living room. Instead, she found a middle-aged real estate agent holding a pamphlet, pitching her services to Timothy. The tension in Clarissa's shoulders eased. Timothy quickly saw Clarissa's worried expression and shook his head, mouthing, "Not Alicia." Clarissa managed a feeble smile, relieved but reminded of how her trauma still lingered close to the surface. After the agent left, Timothy turned to Clarissa. "We can change the locks, if that helps you feel safer," he said gently. She pressed her lips together. "Might be a good idea," she admitted. They hired a locksmith the next day, who promptly replaced the front and back door locks. Clarissa felt a small weight lift, as though she was finally reclaiming her territory, her child's rightful home. Though she continued to return to Margaret's place at night, she found her anxiety lessening each time she visited during the day. All the while, Clarissa's candle business, Everlasting Glow, grew in popularity. Sandra managed online orders while Clarissa handled production and creative design. Orders started rolling in from out of state. At first, Clarissa couldn't believe people in places like Texas or Florida wanted her handmade candles. She started to see a modest profit. One day, she excitedly showed Timothy her new website, and he praised her efforts wholeheartedly. She saw genuine pride in his eyes, a stark contrast to the dismissive attitude he used to have when Alicia was in the picture. Meanwhile, Karma continued to pound on Alicia's door. Word spread that she'd tried her tactics on another co-worker in a different city, but was swiftly fired when HR discovered the pattern of her manipulations. A mutual acquaintance hinted that Alicia was couch surfing, struggling to find stable work because her past references were tainted. Whether the rumor was true or not, Clarissa felt no satisfaction at Alicia's downfall, only relief that Alicia was out of their orbit. Then came a twist no one anticipated. One morning, while Clarissa was feeding Lucy in the living room, Timothy answered his phone and turned pale. He stepped outside, pacing as he talked. After he hung up, he returned with shock etched across his face. "Alicia's pregnant," he said flatly. "She claims it's mine." Clarissa's blood froze. A chill gripped her. She tightened her hold on Lucy. "What?" "She called me from a new number," Timothy stammered. "She claims she's a few months along. She says the child is mine, and that if I don't pay her living expenses, she'll sue for paternity and child support." The air felt thick. Clarissa's mind spun. Another baby? Another innocent life enmeshed in Alicia's manipulations? She looked at Lucy, blissfully unaware, and felt a surge of protectiveness. Did she show proof? "No," Timothy answered, running a hand through his hair in agitation. "She said she has medical records, but I haven't seen them. It could be a lie. But if it's true, oh God." He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands again. Clarissa felt her emotions collide: anger, betrayal, pity. She hated Alicia for the chaos she unleashed, but she also felt sorry for any baby she brought into her twisted schemes. "We need a paternity test," Clarissa said at last, voice steady. "Don't give her a cent until you know for sure," Timothy nodded. "I'm sorry," he croaked. She stared at him, her own heartbreak still raw. "Don't apologize to me," she said softly. "Apologize to Lucy. If this is true, you've complicated her future. And if Alicia's lying, you still let this woman into our lives. Either way, you bear responsibility." He hung his head. "You're right." Clarissa steeled herself, mind racing with possibilities. Would Alicia's new claim derail the tentative peace she'd built for Lucy? Was this a last-ditch effort to regain control over Timothy? Despite the new wave of turmoil, Clarissa stood firm. She wouldn't let Alicia's manipulations break her again. She'd come too far, reclaimed too much. Yes, the news threatened to reopen old wounds. But Clarissa was no longer the timid wife weeping in the nursery corner. She was a mother who'd fought for her child's place in the world, a woman who discovered her own strength in adversity, an entrepreneur forging her path with every candle poured. Her grip on Lucy tightened. If Alicia wanted a war, Clarissa would meet her blow for blow, this time legally, emotionally, and financially. Because the nursery Alicia once tried to claim was Clarissa's domain, it belonged to Lucy, and Lucy alone. And no matter what storms Alicia brought, Clarissa would stand her ground. She had learned that heartbreak could be survived, that betrayal could lead to unexpected strength. If Alicia thought she could exploit Timothy again, she would soon learn Clarissa wasn't the same woman she'd once so callously tormented. Lives can unravel in a heartbeat betrayal, heartbreak, and scalding tears, leaving people fractured and lost. Yet sometimes, destruction clears a path for renewal. In Clarissa's darkest hours, kicked out of her own baby's nursery, mocked by her husband's mistress, she unearthed a resilience she never knew she held. While Alicia's schemes wreaked havoc, karma came swiftly, leaving her in shambles. Timothy's remorse, though genuine, couldn't erase the pain he'd caused. Still, Clarissa discovered a powerful truth. Adversity can sharpen one's spirit, forging self-worth and inner strength. If this story gripped you, please help it reach others who might need inspiration or a stirring reminder of what betrayal and redemption look like. Tap the like button, share it with friends, and subscribe to the channel for more dramatic, heartfelt tales. Your support helps keep these stories alive, reminding us that, even when tragedy strikes, hope remains a guiding light. Millionaire's dinner date with Mistress at the restaurant, interrupted when pregnant wife arrives. Secrets have a way of unveiling themselves at the worst possible moments. Under the shimmering chandeliers of L'Ambroisie in downtown Manhattan, a wealthy husband believed he had orchestrated the perfect evening with his mistress, a clandestine rendezvous shielded by discreet waitstaff and hushed alcoves. Yet fate has a peculiar sense of timing. On this fateful night, his pregnant wife decided to dine at the very same restaurant, drawn by an inexplicable craving for French cuisine. As violin strings reverberated through the softly lit rooms, hearts collided and reputations trembled. The truth emerged in a single, unforgiving flash, threatening to shatter their world forever. Christopher Montclair was never one to accept an ordinary life. The son of a tireless, single mother in a cramped neighborhood on the outskirts of Boston, he learned early that ambition demanded sacrifice. Standing on street corners as a teenager, watching the shiny cars of corporate executives speed by, he vowed that one day he would have everything he desired: wealth, power, and respect. Through scholarships and fierce determination, Christopher graduated top of his class in finance, eventually launching Montclair Holdings in Manhattan. By his mid-30s, he was a millionaire many times over. His personal life seemed equally charmed. 3 years ago, he met and married Evelyn Rosenberg, now Evelyn Montclair, a former dancer of quiet elegance. Though her dancing career ended after a knee injury, she channeled her passion into philanthropic work. Evelyn, cherishing her pregnancy, hoped Christopher would become as devoted a father as he was a businessman. Yet, in the shadows of success, Christopher grew restless. He craved novelty. The high-stakes deals and relentless boardroom battles sharpened his appetite for risk, and soon that appetite leaked into his personal affairs. He began an illicit relationship with Ariel Romano, a seductive real estate agent known among New York's elite. Ariel was everything Christopher's respectable life was not: spontaneous, daring, and entirely unconcerned with social norms. Their affair started innocently enough, a harmless flirtation over luxury property listings, but it escalated. Before long, they were meeting in penthouse apartments and exclusive hotel suites, each encounter more secretive than the last. Evelyn remained oblivious, preoccupied with decorating the nursery and planning a charity ball for underprivileged art students. She yearned only for a joyful life with Christopher and their unborn child, trusting wholeheartedly in her husband's devotion. Even Veronica Parker, Evelyn's closest friend, and the woman who had introduced her to Christopher, saw no signs of infidelity. The Montclairs appeared the picture of marital bliss. But on one crisp spring evening, everything would unravel at L'Ambroisie, the city's famed French restaurant. Ariel had insisted they dine somewhere a little more public, claiming she was tired of feeling like a secret. Christopher, flirting with danger, agreed. Neither realized that Evelyn, compelled by an inexplicable craving, would walk through the same doors that very night, setting off a chain reaction that would upend all their lives. Christopher rose early, as he did each morning, sipping dark roast coffee while reviewing urgent emails from Montclair Holdings. He anticipated a day of delicate negotiations for a multi-million-dollar real estate venture. But overshadowing the business chatter was a text from Ariel. "Don't forget tonight. Tables booked at L'Ambroisie, 8 p.m. sharp. No more excuses." He felt a ripple of unease. He was adept at compartmentalizing his affair, slotting illicit moments into the corners of his schedule. Yet the gravity of Ariel's request, dining with her at a restaurant known for its notable clientele, made him twitch with apprehension. Still, the allure of Ariel's presence overrode his caution. Meanwhile, across the city, Evelyn was experiencing an entirely different morning. At 7 months pregnant, her body felt foreign, each movement more deliberate. She had been consumed with organizing a charity auction that would fund arts programs in struggling schools. She felt the baby move frequently a source of endless wonder, and her devotion to both the child and Christopher remained unwavering. Still, on this particular morning, she sensed an odd restlessness. She tried calling Christopher, hoping to discuss potential baby names or simply hear the reassuring sound of his voice. He answered with what she recognized as his professional tone, and after a few rushed pleasantries, he ended the call. She felt a pang of disappointment, but quickly reminded herself that he was under immense business pressure. In her philanthropic circles, Evelyn was planning to host a gala for influential donors. Veronica Parker, always her supportive friend, texted her an idea for the event theme. Evelyn responded enthusiastically, pressing the phone against her baby bump, as though the child could somehow absorb her excitement. That afternoon, as she concluded a meeting with event planners, a sudden craving struck her French cuisine with rich sauces and decadent pastries. Normally, she would wait for Christopher to propose a date night, but something about her restlessness, about the baby's insistent kicks, pushed her to be spontaneous. She recalled overhearing a friend mention L'Ambroisie. Evelyn decided she would simply go on her own, or perhaps invite Veronica for company. The decision that seemed so innocent in her mind would soon set the stage for a night that none of them would forget. At Montclair Holdings, Christopher stood at the head of a glass-walled conference room, projecting confidence as he presented to potential investors. He had a gift for weaving numbers into compelling narratives, painting visions of acquisitions and profits. Yet, beneath the polished exterior, his thoughts kept returning to the evening ahead. He remembered Ariel's parting words from their last meeting. "If you're not serious about us, tell me now." He had responded by promising that they'd have a special dinner soon, something more than a hasty meeting at a nondescript hotel. His intention was to placate her, to keep the delicate balance between mistress and wife intact for just a little longer. Across Manhattan, Ariel prepared with determined focus. She selected a daring backless black dress, paired with a statement necklace. She scheduled a blowout for her glossy raven hair at a chic salon. Every detail was meticulously chosen to reinforce her place in Christopher's world, whether he was ready to publicly acknowledge it or not. At exactly 6:30 p.m., Christopher's driver navigated through rush-hour traffic to pick him up outside Montclair Holdings. Sliding into the back seat of the Mercedes, Christopher loosened his tie, breathing out a tense sigh. He texted Ariel, "On my way. See you soon," she responded with a single heart emoji. That tiny symbol made him feel both excited and uneasy. Unbeknownst to either of them, Evelyn was also en route to L'Ambroisie. She sat in the back of a taxi, tapping the driver's shoulder to confirm the restaurant address. The baby kicked wildly, making her smile. She had no reservations, but hoped a table would be available. Pregnant cravings, after all, felt urgent. She made a mental note to tell Christopher about her impromptu evening, imagining he would find the story endearing. "I just had to have French cuisine." Fate, however, was weaving its own narrative. Three people, each with their own expectations and secrets, were converging on the same upscale dining room. Crystal chandeliers would illuminate hidden truths. The hush of piano music would underscore unrehearsed confessions. And a single dinner would become the catalyst for a storm of revelations. L'Ambroisie boasted an ambience of refined opulence, marble floors polished to a sheen, warm candlelight flickering from crystal sconces, and waitstaff gliding seamlessly between linen-draped tables. Christopher arrived first, stepping inside with an air of practiced confidence. He approached the maitre d', who recognized him instantly. Although Christopher had called to make a reservation under Ariel's name, his reputation preceded him. "Good evening, Monsieur Montclair. This way, please," the maitre d' said, discreetly gesturing to a secluded corner table partially hidden by tall floral arrangements. Slipping him a folded $100 bill, Christopher quietly requested privacy. The maitre d' nodded, accustomed to the demands of high-profile patrons. Minutes later, Ariel appeared, turning heads in her sleek black gown. She caught Christopher's eye, and the corner of her mouth lifted in a smile victory. Desire, something in between. Sliding into the booth beside him, she kissed him on the cheek, ignoring the subtle glances from a nearby table. They placed their drink orders, a glass of red for her, a neat whiskey for him. In hushed tones, they exchanged pleasantries that masked deeper agendas. Meanwhile, at the front desk, Evelyn entered, dressed simply in a navy wrap dress that accommodated her growing belly. She carried herself with quiet poise, politely asking if there was room for a walk-in. Seeing her condition and gentle demeanor, the hostess arranged a small table near a window. Evelyn sat, relieved to have satisfied her sudden craving. She rubbed her stomach, an affectionate gesture toward the child within, before turning to the menu. As the evening progressed, Christopher and Ariel settled into a tension-laced conversation. She demanded clarity. "We've been doing this for months. When do I stop being your secret?" Christopher hedged, knowing how precarious it was. He promised he'd figure it out soon, glancing around nervously. Sensing his discomfort, Ariel arched a brow. "He's anxious about something," she thought. Little did she know his worst fears were about to materialize. On the other side of the dining room, Evelyn savored a warm bowl of French onion soup, blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding just a few tables away. Yet the safety of her ignorance would vanish the moment she rose to stretch her legs, inadvertently glimpsing the silhouette of her husband leaning intimately close to another woman. Veronica Parker, ever the loyal friend, had sensed something off in Christopher's behavior for weeks. During casual chats with Evelyn, she picked up on small inconsistencies, late meetings, hurried phone calls, half-baked excuses. Though not prone to paranoia, Veronica felt an unsettling suspicion take root. It was sheer coincidence that she found herself near L'Ambroisie that very evening. She had just wrapped up a meeting of her own, and as she prepared to hail a taxi, she noticed Evelyn stepping inside the famed French restaurant. At first, Veronica felt delighted. How wonderful that Evelyn is treating herself. Then a prick of concern. Christopher rarely mentioned dinner plans. Why is Evelyn here alone? Unable to quell her instincts, Veronica slipped into the restaurant's foyer. She told herself she merely wanted to say hello, but a deeper part of her admitted she was on high alert. The hostess directed her to Evelyn's table with a polite smile. "Veronica!" Evelyn exclaimed softly, surprised but pleased. "What are you doing here?" Her eyes shone with a mix of joy and relief. She hadn't wanted to eat by herself, not in her pregnant state, and here was the perfect companion. Veronica sat down, ordering a glass of sparkling water. "I was nearby and thought I'd pop in. How are you?" Her gaze flickered across the room, always scanning, as if her subconscious was searching for a reason behind her nagging worry. Evelyn giggled lightly. "I'm good, just had this craving for French food. The baby's definitely shaping my taste buds." She patted her belly. "Christopher's schedule is crazy, so I came on my own." Veronica's heart sank. Where exactly is Christopher, she wondered. She wanted to ask, but something in Evelyn's radiant smile held her back. Instead, she made small talk, describing her day. Still, her eyes continued to roam the tables, catching glimpses of couples in hushed conversation. A flicker of movement in a corner booth grabbed her attention, a man with a familiar profile, leaning in close to a raven-haired woman. Veronica's pulse quickened. No, it can't be. She craned her neck for a better look, hoping to be proven wrong. The next few seconds would confirm her worst fears. The man was Christopher Montclair, and the woman was most definitely not Evelyn. Veronica felt her stomach clench as she processed the sight of Christopher with another woman. She watched him discreetly tilt his head toward the raven-haired stranger, noting the conspiratorial closeness between them. Everything about their posture screamed intimacy. Her chest tightened. How could he do this, especially with Evelyn pregnant? Struggling to maintain composure, Veronica turned her attention back to her friend. Evelyn, noticing the tension in Veronica's face, frowned. "Veronica, are you okay? You look pale." Evelyn's concern proved too much for Veronica's conscience. She couldn't lie, but she also didn't want to devastate her friend in front of half the restaurant. Finally mustering her composure, she took a steadying breath. "Evelyn, I need you to stay calm," she began quietly, her voice trembling. "But I think you should stand up and look over there." She subtly gestured toward the corner booth. Evelyn's eyes widened. She turned in her seat, scanning for whatever had caused Veronica's distress. At first, she saw only well-dressed patrons engaged in their own quiet conversations. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she recognized Christopher's distinct silhouette. Her heart skipped a beat. Sitting across from him was an elegant woman in a low-cut black dress, holding his hand atop the table. The vision of Christopher Montclair in an intimate setting with someone who was very much not his wife assaulted Evelyn's senses. Time seemed to slow. A rush of adrenaline surged through her, intensifying every sight, every sound. She watched as Christopher reached for his glass, tension etched across his face. Ariel murmured something, her lips barely moving. It was a private moment that felt suddenly, violently exposed to Evelyn's horrified stare. "Veronica." "Oh my God," Evelyn whispered, tears already forming. Shock coursed through her, making her limbs go cold. She struggled to breathe, shaking her head as if trying to dispel a nightmarish illusion. Veronica placed a comforting hand on Evelyn's arm. "Listen, let's leave." "We can." But Evelyn stood abruptly, the scrape of her chair against the polished floor drawing a few curious glances. With an unsteady gait, she started toward Christopher's table. The hush of the restaurant seemed to envelop her like a cocoon of dread. Every step brought her closer to the moment that would fracture her life irreparably. Christopher, mid-sentence as he tried to placate Ariel, felt a shift in the air behind him. He turned, and the blood seemed to freeze in his veins. There stood Evelyn, tears shimmering in her eyes. The shock on her face was a mirror of his own stunned horror. Ariel, caught off guard, pulled her hand from Christopher's and straightened in her seat, her cheeks flushing under Evelyn's anguished gaze. The restaurant, previously filled with soft conversation, fell unnervingly silent. Even the waiters, carrying trays of appetizers, paused, sensing a sudden maelstrom of tension. For a long moment, no one spoke. Evelyn's voice finally emerged, brittle and trembling. "Christopher, what is going on?" She pressed one hand protectively over her rounded belly. Christopher stood, knocking over a half-filled whiskey glass in the process. Liquor spilled across the tablecloth, an apt visual for the unraveling scene. His mouth opened and closed helplessly. "Evelyn, I can explain," he sputtered, though no reasonable explanation could exist for his presence with Ariel. Ariel, her bravado faltering, pushed her chair back. She felt the piercing weight of guilt, especially when her eyes flicked to Evelyn's pregnant form. "I can't believe I'm part of this horrible spectacle," she thought, cheeks burning with shame. Veronica arrived, stepping between Evelyn and Christopher as if to shield her friend from further hurt. Her voice low and fierce, she hissed, "You better think carefully before you say another word, Christopher." Evelyn's gaze darted from her husband to the woman in black. She tried to reconcile the man she'd married, the one who tenderly touched her belly in anticipation of fatherhood, with this stranger. An avalanche of memories flooded her mind, their wedding vows, his excited reaction to her pregnancy test, the nights she fell asleep, believing he was working late for their future. Anger mingled with heartbreak in her quavering voice. "Who is she?" Evelyn demanded, even though part of her already knew. "How long?" Christopher swallowed hard. Around them, curious diners pretended not to stare, yet the spectacle was impossible to ignore. He stammered, "Evelyn, let's talk somewhere else, please." But Evelyn shook her head, tears spilling. "No. We talk here," she said, voice cracking. "Tell me everything." Caught in a swirl of public shame, Christopher realized there was no escape. The carefully constructed facade of his double life had just detonated, and he was left standing in the debris of his own deceit. The intensity of Evelyn's heartbreak slammed into Christopher like a tidal wave. He had always believed he could control every aspect of his life, orchestrate his marriage, his affair, his business. Now, under the glare of Lambrasie's chandeliers, that illusion crumbled. Ariel, her bravado gone, stared at her hands, wishing to vanish. She attempted a few words of apology but couldn't form them properly. The weight of Evelyn's tear-filled eyes was too much. Veronica, her arms wrapped protectively around Evelyn, shot Christopher an accusing glare. Was this worth it? Her question dripped with contempt. "You fool, Christopher! She's pregnant with your child." "How dare you!" Christopher raked a trembling hand through his hair. He turned to Ariel, then back to Evelyn, torn between the woman he had married and the woman he had seduced. He let out a shaky breath. "Evelyn, I swear I never intended." The words died in his throat, pathetically insufficient. Evelyn's tears flowed unchecked. Her voice trembled with equal parts, sorrow and fury. "How long has this been going on?" she demanded. A pained look crossed Christopher's face. He glanced at Ariel, who offered a single nod, giving him tacit permission to confess. 6 months, he admitted quietly, feeling a wave of shame crash over him. The color drained from Evelyn's cheeks, and she swayed slightly, forcing Veronica to steady her. 6 months. More than half the time she had been pregnant. The shock and betrayal stole her breath. Nearby diners exchanged glances, unsure whether to leave or linger in morbid fascination. One waiter, attempting to mask the tension, approached carefully to check on them, but Christopher waved him off. There was no delicate way to handle this meltdown. Evelyn's composure finally snapped. "How could you do this?" she whispered. "You lied to me every single day." She pressed a trembling hand against her belly. "What about this baby? Our future?" Christopher stepped forward, tears threatening to spill. "Evelyn, I'm so sorry. I messed up. I'll end it. This was a mistake, I swear." Veronica's voice cut in like a blade. "Not here. Let's get Evelyn out of this place," she said, her tone gentler when addressing her friend. "Come on, sweetheart. You need to breathe." Clinging to what little dignity remained, Evelyn turned away from Christopher, refusing to let him even touch her arm. Veronica guided her out of the restaurant, leaving Christopher and Ariel in a silence that felt like a funeral. Outside L'Ambroisie, Evelyn dissolved into sobs. The cool night air provided scant relief for her shattered composure. Veronica hailed a taxi, gently helping Evelyn inside. Concern etched into Veronica's features, her voice hushed and soothing. "We'll head to my apartment," she murmured, guiding her friend's hand. "You don't need to go back to him tonight." Inside the cab, Evelyn's tears ebbed into silence. Her eyes stared unfocused at the passing streetlights. Memories of her marriage replayed as snapshots, Christopher carrying her over the threshold of their penthouse after their honeymoon, laughing over burnt toast in the early mornings, the joy in his eyes when she announced her pregnancy. And had all of it been a lie, she wondered. She felt a hollow ache in her chest, overshadowed by the faint stirrings of the baby within her, a reminder that she now had to think of more than just herself. Meanwhile, Christopher stood on the curb outside L'Ambroisie, torn between chasing after Evelyn and consoling Ariel. Ariel quietly touched his arm. "I'll catch my own ride," she offered, voice subdued. "I need to go home." Christopher didn't stop her, his thoughts fully consumed by Evelyn's anguish. As he turned, paparazzi bulbs flashed. Someone had alerted them that a scandal was brewing. Already, a couple of opportunistic photographers had arrived, snapping pictures of the rattled millionaire in his finest suit, alone and exposed. Christopher ducked his head, heading quickly to his waiting Mercedes. He instructed his driver to follow Veronica's cab, but lost them in the congested avenues. He texted Evelyn, "I'm sorry. Please let me see you. Let's talk." Only silence returned. At Veronica's apartment, Evelyn nearly collapsed onto the sofa. She covered her face with shaking hands. Veronica hovered, wanting to provide comfort but unsure how. She made tea, placing a warm mug in front of Evelyn, who stared at it blankly. "Everything's going to be okay," Veronica attempted, though her own voice wavered with uncertainty. Evelyn's lips trembled. "I thought he loved me," she whispered. "I don't know how to deal with this, especially now with the baby." They sat together, two friends enveloped in heartbreak and confusion. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual energy, unaware of how drastically Evelyn Montclair's life had just changed. Evelyn stayed at Veronica's apartment that night, refusing to speak with Christopher despite his repeated calls and texts. She barely slept, haunted by visions of her husband with his mistress. Around dawn, she began rummaging through her phone for any evidence she might have missed: strange texts, unexplained receipts, or suspicious photos. Each new sign of deceit felt like a fresh laceration. By mid-morning, Veronica persuaded Evelyn to visit her obstetrician for a routine checkup, worried that the emotional toll could affect the pregnancy. Dr. Alicia Warren greeted Evelyn with gentle concern, running tests to ensure the baby remained healthy. Sensing the distress in her patient, Dr. Warren suggested counseling or a support group. Evelyn nodded absently, uncertain of how to move forward, only relieved to hear the baby's heartbeat was strong. Meanwhile, Christopher was in damage control mode on multiple fronts. At Montclair Holdings, the scandal had already begun circulating in hushed tones. A few tabloids picked up rumors of a marital dispute at a high-end restaurant. Christopher's PR team scrambled to deflect attention, but they could do little about the swirl of gossip. Some of his business associates, especially those with conservative values, expressed discomfort with the negative publicity. Desperate to reach Evelyn, He sent flowers and an apologetic note to Veronica's apartment. Veronica threw them in the trash without showing Evelyn, deciding her friend needed space rather than hollow gestures. She knew Christopher was likely frantic, but she had no sympathy left for him. Her priority was Evelyn's emotional and physical well-being. Ariel, too, found herself under scrutiny. She received a barrage of calls from curious acquaintances and media outlets. Mortified by the public shame, she decided to retreat. She took an impromptu leave of absence from her real estate firm, claiming family matters. Each time the phone rang, she felt a stab of guilt, recalling Evelyn's anguished face. In the midst of the chaos, Evelyn scrolled through social media posts announcing the next philanthropic event she was slated to host. Her name was front and center, lauded for generosity and compassion. The cruel irony struck her like a hammer. She was celebrated for her empathy while her own marriage was imploding. She found herself weeping softly, uncertain how to reconcile the life she had with the life she thought she had. 2 days later, Christopher finally managed a tense meeting with Evelyn. Exhausted from emotional turmoil, she agreed to see him at Veronica's apartment, on the condition that Veronica remained in the next room. She refused to face him alone. When Christopher arrived, he clutched a stack of papers, financial documents, property titles, and what looked like the beginnings of a legal separation agreement. Evelyn sat stiffly on the couch, arms folded protectively over her abdomen. Her eyes were red-rimmed but resolute. He sat opposite her, fidgeting with the papers as though they were a lifeline. His throat constricted, and he had to force himself to meet her gaze. "I'm so sorry. I can't undo what I did, but I want to do whatever it takes to make things right." She held his stare, her voice quiet but unwavering. "Can you make it so that it never happened?" she asked, a rhetorical question laden with heartbreak. "Because that's the only thing I really want." Christopher felt tears prick his eyes. "I can't, but I'm prepared to give you anything, property, money, whatever, if it will at least make you feel secure. I know I violated your trust." Evelyn's lips tightened. "Trust was never about money. You think these papers fix the pain you caused?" She gestured at the documents. "I used to believe you were different from all those power-hungry men. Now I see that maybe I never knew you." He swallowed hard, guilt shredding him from within. "I know this is my fault. But please, let's try counseling. I want to be there for the baby. We don't have to decide everything right now. Just give me a chance to show you I can change." A tear slid down Evelyn's cheek, but her composure remained. "You want me to risk my heart again when I'm already shattered?" She placed a hand on her belly. "What about our child's future? You've given us every reason to doubt you." Christopher nodded, struggling for the right words. "I understand, but I'm not walking away from my child. We'll handle visitation, support whatever you think is best. I don't want to lose you." Evelyn's gaze flickered with pain. For a moment, she pictured a family dynamic where Christopher remained only a financial provider. The image twisted her stomach. "I need time," she finally said, voice shaky. "Time to decide if I can even tolerate you in my life, let alone as a partner." A fragile silence stretched, heavy with unresolved tension. Veronica, listening in from the hallway, knew that time might not heal all wounds, but it was the only possible path toward any semblance of reconciliation. Despite the devastation, life refused to pause. Evelyn pressed forward with her charity work, attending meetings and organizing her upcoming gala. Wherever she went, she kept a careful mask in place, never revealing the agony beneath. Only Veronica and a few other close friends knew the truth. Gossip columns continued to speculate about cracks in the Montclair marriage, but Evelyn refused to feed the stories, avoiding all interviews and appearances with Christopher. Meanwhile, Christopher focused on damage control at Montclair Holdings. Some clients, wary of scandal, quietly distanced themselves from deals. Competitors capitalized on rumors of instability, hoping to lure away Christopher's investors. For the first time, he realized how quickly a personal failing could destabilize his professional empire. He worked relentless hours, fueled by guilt and the fear of losing everything he had worked for. Amid this upheaval, Ariel Romano wrestled with her own shame and confusion. She had believed Christopher's assurances that his marriage was a hollow shell, yet seeing Evelyn face-to-face pregnant and weeping had shattered that illusion. Disgusted with herself, she tendered her resignation at the real estate firm. Some colleagues suspected a scandal, but she offered no explanations, determined to leave Manhattan for good. Months slipped by, and Evelyn's belly grew heavier. She maintained her separation from Christopher. At Veronica's urging, she agreed to a few couples counseling sessions. Meeting in a small, discreet office, they sat across from a gentle-voiced therapist named Dr. Amber Reynolds. Dr. Reynolds guided them through raw emotions, betrayal, remorse, fear of abandonment. Some sessions were explosive, with Evelyn storming out in tears. Others ended quietly, neither of them certain whether it was better to salvage their marriage or finalize a divorce. Still, one truth united them both: the baby. Christopher attended prenatal appointments whenever Evelyn allowed, sitting quietly in the exam room as the doctor explained each stage of development. They listened to the baby's heartbeat together, an echoing thrum that stirred conflicting feelings. Evelyn would sometimes catch a tear sliding down Christopher's cheek. In those fleeting moments, she'd recall the man she once adored. As her due date approached, Christopher organized the nursery in their penthouse, a heartbreaking gesture, since Evelyn refused to move back in. Yet he persisted, painting walls a soothing pastel, assembling a crib, folding tiny clothes. Each item felt like a plea to Evelyn: "Come home. Let me fix this." But she couldn't ignore the memory of him in that restaurant corner booth, whispering sweet nothings to another woman. One chilly evening, Veronica arrived at Evelyn's sublet with a worried expression. She had just learned from a mutual acquaintance that Ariel had left the city. Normally, Veronica wouldn't bother Evelyn with anything about Christopher's mistress, but something in the rumor stirred her curiosity. She apparently moved to a small town near the Canadian border, Veronica shared. Sipping tea in Evelyn's modest living room, she wants a fresh start. Evelyn's face remained impassive. "Good for her," she said quietly. Turning to the nursery corner, she'd set up a bassinet, a plush rocking chair. Despite her constant pain, she had prepared for the baby's arrival with methodical care. "At least she won't be here to ruin more marriages." Veronica nodded, but saw the flicker of unresolved hurt in her friend's eyes. The two women sat in pensive silence, interrupted only by Evelyn's slight wince contraction, a false alarm. She had been experiencing Braxton Hicks contractions over the past week, a sign that her body was gearing up for labor. The true test arrived late one night when Evelyn felt an unmistakable, piercing pain. Her water broke in a rush of panic and excitement. She called Veronica, who sped over in her car, helping Evelyn gather her bag. They phoned Christopher, leaving a breathless voicemail. "We're going to the hospital. The baby's coming." Within half an hour, Christopher burst into the maternity ward. Veronica paced the hallway, wearing a look of relief when he finally appeared. Evelyn, already wheeled into a labor room, endured wave after wave of contractions. The medical team worked calmly, hooking her to monitors and administering pain management. Tentatively, Christopher approached her bedside, his eyes filled with genuine concern. "Evelyn," he whispered, leaning closer, "I'm here. Whatever you need, I'll do it." She clung to his hand, despite all that had happened. In that moment, the anger and heartbreak seemed secondary to the urgency of bringing new life safely into the world. Labor stretched for hours into the dawn. Christopher remained at Evelyn's side the entire time, wiping the sweat from her brow, murmuring words of encouragement. Veronica occasionally stepped in to offer moral support, then gave them space. Despite the swirl of broken trust, an unspoken truce settled over everyone. This child was more important than their wounds. Finally, as the sun rose, a piercing cry sliced through the tension. A baby boy, red-faced, wailing, alive, arrived in the care of skilled doctors. The room flooded with emotional release. Christopher's tears flowed freely, and Evelyn, trembling, reached out to hold the tiny, perfect life she had carried for 9 months. For a moment, they were united in awe, heartbreak suspended by this pure miracle. Andrew James Montclair became the center of Evelyn's universe in an instant. Holding him against her chest, she felt a profound love, unlike anything she had known. For Christopher, the moment he touched his son's delicate fingers, guilt and gratitude warred within him. How could I have risked losing this, he thought. He vowed silently never to fail his family again. The next few days at the hospital were a haze of feeding schedules, nurse visits, and excited friends offering congratulations. Veronica arrived with flowers and a flurry of kisses for the baby, tears of relief sparkling in her eyes. Even a few well-meaning acquaintances from Evelyn's charity circle dropped by, trying not to mention the scandal that had nearly overshadowed this precious event. Evelyn remained guarded around Christopher. She allowed him to hold Andrew, to change diapers under the nurse's guidance, but they barely spoke about anything beyond the baby's needs. Late at night, when Andrew slept in the bassinet beside her hospital bed, Evelyn stared at the ceiling, rehashing the heartbreak at Lamboisie. She felt torn between the father Christopher was already becoming and the husband who had deceived her so thoroughly. On the day of discharge, Christopher insisted on driving Evelyn and Andrew to her sublet. He had purchased a top-of-the-line car seat, which he installed himself, triple-checking every safety measure. During the ride, the baby dozed, and Evelyn stared at the city streets, wondering how they had reached this point, a new family already strained by betrayal. At the sublet, Christopher carried Andrew inside, carefully placing him in a prepared bassinet. The space was small, filled with baby essentials and a sense of transition. He lingered near the doorway, unsure if he was welcome to stay. Evelyn offered no immediate invitation. Exhausted, she lowered herself onto the couch, clutching a pillow. Christopher cleared his throat. "I'll, leave you both to rest," he said softly. "But call me if you need anything. I mean it, anything." Evelyn nodded, not yet ready to face the future of their relationship. She whispered, "Thank you, more for his help with Andrew than for any sense of forgiveness." In the hush that followed, Christopher departed, leaving Evelyn to cradle Andrew, alone but fiercely determined to protect her child's future. The question of whether Christopher could be part of that future remained tangled in layers of uncertainty. The next few weeks brought a delicate dance of co-parenting. Christopher visited almost daily, scheduled around Evelyn's comfort level. He offered to cover medical bills and any extras, but she accepted only what concerned Andrew. Pride and lingering anger prevented her from letting him solve her problems with money. Instead, she insisted on doing as much herself as possible, perhaps to prove she was capable without him. Amid the bleary-eyed nights and relentless feeding cycles, Evelyn discovered an unexpected resilience. Veronica helped too, often sleeping on the couch when Evelyn was overwhelmed. Together, they navigated Andrew's first baths, doctor checkups, and the challenges of infant colic. Through it all, Christopher hovered, ready to step in when permitted. He brought groceries, took out the trash, changed Andrew's diapers, anything to ease Evelyn's burden. Their couples therapy sessions resumed, now with Andrew sometimes napping in a stroller in the corner. The therapist encouraged them to talk about rebuilding trust, if that was something Evelyn desired. At first, she remained silent, arms folded. Christopher laid bare his remorse, explaining how he had allowed ambition and insecurity to derail him. "I always felt like I had to chase excitement," he confessed, voice cracking. "I was scared of losing who I was, but I lost myself anyway." Evelyn found her defenses softening slightly. She couldn't forget the image of Christopher cradling Andrew during those first moments of life. Underneath her betrayal lay a fraction of hope that the man she loved still existed, changed by fatherhood. One evening, after Christopher helped put Andrew to sleep, Evelyn surprised him by inviting him to stay for a late dinner. They sat in her small kitchen, bowls of reheated pasta steaming between them. The conversation was halting, but less hostile than before. She recounted a funny story from the day, describing how Andrew nearly kicked over a pile of clean laundry. Christopher laughed, the sound tinged with relief. By the end of the meal, Evelyn found herself thinking, could we find a way back from this? The question lingered, unanswered, but the tension in the air softened. Even small steps seemed like monumental progress. If they continued like this, there might be a chance, slim, fragile, but real, that their fractured love could be pieced back together. As Andrew reached 3 months old, his joyous giggles illuminated the sublet's every corner. Evelyn, while still hurting, couldn't deny the bond forming between father and son. Christopher had become gentle, patient attributes she never quite associated with his cutthroat persona in finance. Their therapist remarked on Christopher's transformation, observing that fatherhood and remorse had awakened a deeper empathy within him. Yet, uncertainty persisted. Evelyn had not rescinded the legal separation documents, and Christopher respected her autonomy. He took each day as an opportunity to prove himself, not through grand gestures of wealth, but through consistent presence. He sometimes arrived unannounced, bearing diapers or homemade soup from his newly hired chef food that he claimed to have tasted first to ensure it was mild enough for breastfeeding mothers. Evelyn rolled her eyes at times, but also smiled at his earnestness. Veronica noted the change too, remarking privately to Evelyn, "He seems genuine. Still, be careful." Evelyn appreciated the warning, especially considering the heartbreak that still lay raw within her. But in rare, unguarded moments, she found herself reminiscing about the early days of their courtship, the laughter, the spontaneous dates, the sense of partnership they once shared. A pivotal moment came when Montclair Holdings hosted a public charity event benefiting the very arts program Evelyn championed. Unsure if she should attend, Evelyn hesitated, remembering the media speculation around their marriage. But Christopher insisted he wanted to honor her contributions publicly, inviting her to stand by his side on stage as they presented a check. After deliberation, Evelyn decided to appear, if only to spotlight her cause. The night of the event, she dressed in an elegant yet modest gown, leaving Andrew with Veronica's trusted babysitter. Stepping onto the stage before a glittering crowd, she felt her heart race. Christopher introduced her with genuine pride, crediting her dedication and philanthropic spirit. His voice wavered when he mentioned the birth of their son and how crucial family support was to his success. Surprisingly, the audience erupted in applause, and for a moment, Evelyn stood beside Christopher, a united front. The tabloids, snapping photos, churned out headlines about a reconciliation in progress. Yet, beyond the cameras, Evelyn whispered to Christopher, "This doesn't mean everything's fixed. We still have a long way to go." He nodded solemnly. "I know." Then he looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "But I'm not giving up, ever." She felt a flicker of warmth in her chest, a sensation she almost dared to call hope. Slowly, deliberately, Evelyn allowed herself to consider the possibility of forgiveness. It was not a decision she reached lightly. The wound of betrayal ran deep, and she would not pretend it could be erased. But the idea of giving Andrew a chance at a unified home pulled at her heartstrings, and Christopher's unwavering devotion offered a light at the end of a dark tunnel. They continued therapy, exploring the threads of their past that had led to the affair. Christopher spoke about his childhood abandonment issues and the hunger for validation that fueled his restless pursuits. Evelyn opened up about her fear of losing her identity, especially after leaving her dance career. Sometimes the sessions were soaked in tears. Other times they discovered small joys, like shared memories of their honeymoon or comedic recollections of learning to dance together in their living room. When Andrew turned 6 months old, Evelyn tentatively suggested that Christopher move back in not permanently, but for a trial period. She wanted to see if they could coexist as a family without the weight of the penthouse's history. Christopher, both elated and nervous, brought only the essentials. He spent nights rocking Andrew to sleep, early mornings preparing coffee for Evelyn, and afternoons trying to help with laundry or errands, tasks he once dismissed as trivial. They grew closer in small, everyday ways, laughing at Andrew's attempts to crawl, clinking coffee cups in the morning, occasionally brushing hands in the kitchen. One crisp autumn afternoon, they took Andrew to Central Park. Watching him marvel at the leaves, they shared an emotional moment on a bench, reflecting on how far they'd come from that disastrous night at L'Ambroisie. Evelyn realized she still loved Christopher, albeit cautiously. She saw a man changed by regret and shaped by fatherhood. Feeling the warmth of that revelation, Evelyn leaned her head on his shoulder, letting out a soft sigh. Christopher kissed her temple, tears glistening in his eyes. Both were aware they still bore scars, but maybe, just maybe, those scars could become markers of growth rather than perpetual reminders of pain. In time, they decided to renew their vows, not as a grand spectacle, but as a quiet affirmation among close friends. On a terrace overlooking the city, they exchanged promises that were raw and real, acknowledging past hurt while looking forward with hope. Andrew cooed in Veronica's arms, the living symbol of their second chance. And so, the millionaire's dinner date with his mistress, once a scandal that threatened to tear apart two lives, became the crucible for a deeper love. Where once there was betrayal, there emerged a renewed bond. It was neither perfect nor guaranteed, but for Christopher and Evelyn Montclair, it was worth every effort to restore what they nearly lost forever. When relationships stand on the precipice, choices define whether we fall apart or fight our way back. Christopher and Evelyn Montclair discovered that heartbreak can crack even the strongest foundations, but it can also illuminate hidden fractures in need of repair. Their journey from a disastrous dinner rendezvous to a quietly renewed vow taught them that love alone doesn't survive. It demands humility, steady work, and the willingness to see each other anew. In the unguarded moments, midnight feedings, heartfelt therapy sessions, or simple acts of kindness, they found the fragments of trust that still remained. Their story reveals a universal truth. Sometimes the path to healing runs through our deepest wounds. Share your thoughts below. Do you believe in second chances after betrayal? If this story resonated with you, like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel to follow more tales of resilience and redemption.